Hello there. You're listening to the No Limits Map the Triathlon podcast, episode number 55. In this episode, we talk about it's time to take out the good China and racing during a pandemic. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Todd Malcolm, and I've been in the sport of triathlon for over 25 years. I'm head coach of a triathlon group you've probably never heard of. We don't train all the time, and we don't have goals to win races. In fact, our motivation is the exact opposite. We train for triathlons in addition to living busy lives with the goal of staying in shape and challenging ourselves in this amazing sport of triathlon. We are triathletes with no limits, and this is your map to triathlon. Okay, so taking out the good China and racing in the pandemic. What does all that mean? Well, on Saturday, we were fortunate to be able to race in a triathlon here in Calgary, Alberta. We believe it's going to be the only triathlon in Alberta, which is quite something. Now, this podcast is not going to be about whether you should or you shouldn't be racing during this time. I did a podcast previously where I talked about who should and who shouldn't be racing a triathlon during this time. And I'm not going to talk about that during this podcast. So go to the previous podcast if you want to listen to that. But this podcast, I was really thinking about why am I going to do this? I'm going to do this primarily for myself. So that 10 years from now, when I look back and go, how was that race in the pandemic? I think, this is going to be, history making. And really the only, well, I'm hoping that everything turns around in 2021 and in future years, but this could be definitely the last triathlon in Alberta for this year. So it's a pretty special thing. I want to document it and so that I could go back and look at it. So what I'm going to do, like I said, this podcast is really going to be for me and it's going to be for you guys so that you can learn some tips on what to do in a triathlon and how people can move forward and do triathlons during a pandemic and keeping us safe. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through my steps, the things that I did starting Friday night. Now you're gonna see that, Todd. What are you doing? Why would you do that? And I'm just going to say, look, this is just what I did. So you can take it, you can leave it. You can say, oh, you are crazy. I would never do that, and that's totally fine. But just to give you an idea of what I do before, during, and after a triathlon. So Friday night. What do you have to eat the night before a triathlon? My wife is out of town. So I've got the two boys home. And I think my oldest son wasn't home that night. And so it was just me and Johnny. And Johnny's going into grade 12 and he's very easy to feed. I'm very easy to feed. And so what did we have? We had pizza. Yes, we had pizza and Coca-Cola. Johnny he's a super easy pepperoni guy. Me, I like pepperoni, mushroom, salami, and I think I had olives on it. It was delicious. And I had about 4 big slices. I even had, I think at 10 o'clock at night, I was still hungry, so I had a slice of pizza and another Coke. Johnny's like, what are you doing? Are you, you're racing tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to be fine. I had zero problem sleeping. But what I found, which was interesting, is that I did get a little bit nervous. You could feel the nervousness inside you. And I'm like, why am I nervous? I think I was nervous because, first of all, it's COVID. Should we be racing? And will it be safe? I'm nervous about those things. And I know that if I can do my part to keep myself safe and keep other people safe, then I think it should be fine. And go in there with the whole attitude of being respectful for everything, and it should be fine. So I kind of talked my way through that. But I was also nervous about actually racing. I hadn't raced since, I guess it would be the 70.3 World Championships back in Nice, back in September. So it's been a long time. And this race course, under a different name, it was Joe's Team Triathlon. It was a fundraiser for cancer. And in previous times I raced it, I was actually the overall winner, which is kind of a cool thing. So I thought, well, maybe I can win again today. I'm in a new age group. So I just turned 50 to 54 age group. So I'm getting old, right? So I'm like, is there a chance that I could win this thing? And so I think I was kind of nervous about, oh my gosh, don't put so much pressure on yourself to try to win this thing. Just go out there and have fun. And I remember thinking the morning or maybe late at night, I go, look, you're probably not going to win. And I tell my athletes all this time, you're not going to win the race. And it's a harsh thing to say, but sometimes we have to say it because you're not going to win it. Some people have that chance to win it, but most people don't. So I say, you're not going to win. So I said to myself, you're probably not going to win. And I said, especially if there's juniors. If juniors show up, there's no way. There's no way you can beat these fast juniors. So I slept like a baby. I woke up early, and my wife's not home, so I had to get up early and walk the dog. I'm not the dog walker. My wife is, and so when she's gone, I have to do that. And that was great. But I had to get up early. And so what I did for nutrition in the morning, which is important. You really want to, as triathletes, you want to get things that are in you out. So you want to go to the bathroom. You want to poop. You want to get it out. And the easiest way to do that is you need to put something in. So what I did is I had a banana. I had a banana and a cup of coffee. And that's enough to get the digestive system moving so that things can come out. And the race said, please do not arrive at the race site before 8 a.m. The race is supposed to start at 9, but don't arrive there before 8. So I got there right at 8, and there were still cars there. But because I've already gone to the bathroom, I didn't have to use a porta potty, which is pretty good. I didn't want to. I want to minimize as many touch points as possible, right? But for me, what worked well was the coffee and the banana. And if you're interested in my coffee, I like 2 creams and 2 sugars. One more thing that kind of stressed me out a bit was my bike. So it's a new bike and has these through axles, and it's not easy to take everything apart, like the wheels off. And my wife took my car to visit her parents, and so I was with her car, which is a small Honda, and it's hard to put my bike in there. So I asked my son, hey, can I borrow the CRV tomorrow? And he was out late, and I didn't know if he was going to do it or not. So I was a little worried about that. And even in the morning, I'm like, did he do it or not? Because he had a lot of stuff in the trunk. He had to take that out. And so part of me is like stressed out, but I don't want to look outside. I don't want to see what car is there. I'm like, just trust it. I'm in the shower. Instead of worrying about it, I go, it's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. It's going to be fine. So I just stay relaxed. And by doing that, I could just carry on with my day. And then I came downstairs and I looked over to the door, and he's got this big subwoofer that's in the back of his car, and he had that plus his skateboard on in the front entryway, which told me he cleared out the back of the car for me. I'm like, yes, thank you very much, George. I appreciate it. So that reduced my stress even more because I didn't have to take my bike apart. I just put it in. It made it so much easier. Okay, my nutrition plan, and very, very simple. The distance of the race, you're supposed to be a 750 swim, 2 loops, but to minimize contact points and people passing, they change it from 2 loops to 1 loop, which is about 600 meters, I think, give or take. So 600-meter swim, a 20-kilometer bike ride, and a 5-kilometer run. So it's a sprint. And you do not need a lot of nutrition for that. So for me, what I did is I had 2 water bottles, and both of them were filled with my electrolyte drink, which is isogenic amped or isogenic hydrate. 1 scoop in each. One of the bottles is for pre-race, and one of the bottles is for the bike. And I like to sip on that as I'm driving from the house to the race site. And if it's a bigger race, I'll sip on the whole bottle until it's time for me to go. But because it's only a sprint, I didn't need to take that much fluid in. Although in hindsight, I probably should have drank more fluid. On the bike, I put the water bottle, and that was my nutrition for the race. Before I started the race, I took blocks, those little chewy red cubes. And I had, I think, 2 or 3 of those about 15 minutes before the start. I usually sometimes take a gel, but I thought I'm gonna do the blocks this time, and that worked really well for me. Now I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Now, once I arrived at at the race site, the first thing you need to do was we had to drop off these waivers. And I saw some of my athletes, we walked in with them and they had cones set up or pylons that would keep us at a 6 feet distance from each other. And we had to have these, the paperwork signed out or filled out the night before. And if you did not fill it out, you wouldn't be able to race. And so we had it all filled out and we handed it to them. And then at that same point, they handed us, or just a couple of steps past that, they gave us our timing strap. And then once you handed off your waiver, picked up your timing strap, and then you can go to transition to set up your area. To do a transition for a sprint triathlon is not that hard because you don't need that much stuff. What you need to do, I rack my bike, you rack it by the saddle, hanging from the saddle. You want to check to make sure that there's air pressure in the tires, make sure they're good. Make sure your brakes are not rubbing, make sure you're in an appropriate gear, not in too big of a gear, not in too easy of a gear. I put it right in the middle. My nutrition, I put those extra blocks into my bento box on the bike, just in case I needed it. I had my computer on the bike, and then my helmet, I take my helmet off and put it on the aero bars. And my glasses, my sunglasses, were inside the helmet. And that's, and my biking shoes, I clipped them into my pedals, so they're already on there, ready to go. Beside my bike, I would take out a towel, lay down a towel, and then I'd put out my running shoes. Because it's only a 5-kilometer run, I didn't wear socks, so no socks. I had my running shoes out, and then I had a running hat, and then my running belt with the number on it. And the bag that I had to carry my wetsuit and everything else for the race was beside my bike. And then I just took time to get it all ready to go, and then once it's done, I was out of there. We were chatting with some people. I know volunteers and I know the race directors, and they were chatting with me, and then other athletes chat with me. So I spent probably a little bit too long in there, and then I got out. But a curious thing that I chose were my shoes. The night before, I'm like, I need some fast shoes. It's 5K sprint. I want some fast shoes. So I took out these shoes from last year. They're my New Balance shoes. And my dog, he was just a puppy last year, and he got a hold of my shoes, and he generally doesn't chew the shoes, but this time he did, and he chewed a good chunk of the sole of the shoe gone. But they're good shoes. They're good shoes, and they're quick to put on, and they're comfy, and I know that won't get blisters. I'm like, it's only 5K. What could go wrong? So I took the shoes that had a big chunk from the heel gone. I said, it's gonna be fine. What could go wrong? The reason why for this title of this podcast was, it's time to take out the good China. Look, this is our only triathlon of the year for 2020. Everything else has been canceled. I had a lot of races planned. And I'm not sure about your family, but my family, when we would have special dinners, we'd take out the good, dinnerware, right? Or the china or the pottery or whatever it is, whatever you guys like to do, but you're bringing it out for special occasions. So I'm like, you know what? I'm bringing everything out for this race. I have a brand new bike. So I brought out the new bike. It was a felt IA. And I have a brand new wetsuit. Brought out the wetsuit. It's a De Boer wetsuit. I have a brand new one-piece suit. I'm bringing that out. Everything was brand new except for the shoes, and they had a gigantic hole in it. So it's kind of funny, right? I did have new shoes, but they were not designed for a sprint. They're designed for an Ironman. I didn't want to wear those ones because they were just too slow. And that's what I mean about the good China is everyone in the race was bringing out their good China. Like the guy beside me had a disc wheel on. I could see another disc wheel in the race. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have a disc wheel here for a sprint. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of pressure bringing out the big guns, right? But at the same time, it's kind of nice because we dream about these races all year long, and when you don't have a chance to get out and play, you're like, oh man, I want to bring out my toys. So that's what it was like on Saturday, was bringing out the toys to play, and it was just a lot of fun. Let's see. Oh, I did not wear my watch. My wetsuit is really, really tight, and so on my wrist for sure. And I didn't. I don't think it would fit underneath the wetsuit. So I'm like, screw it. Doesn't matter. I don't care about the swim distance. I don't care about the swim time. So I didn't wear the watch at all. On my bike, I had my bike computer. Underneath, I had my heart rate monitor strap on, and that syncs to my bike computer. So when I was biking, I could see my heart rate, and that's it. I don't have a power meter anymore, so I have no power. I was powerless. What else? I do want to mention that we were all wearing masks in transition. Just recently here in Calgary, it has now become a bylaw that we all have to wear masks when we're in a public inside. But at this race, we had to wear them when we were in transition. But when we were far away from others, I took it off. And like I said, I didn't stay in transition too long. I did not use the porta potties because I wanted to minimize touch points. And I used that before I left home. Okay. Oh, just before the race started, I wanted to quickly check out the water. The lake that I swim at in my community I live at, we have a lake, and the water's been so warm. And I've been swimming just a Speedo, and it feels good. So I'm like, should I wear a wetsuit? Shouldn't I wear a wetsuit? I'm like, it's 600 meters. It's a brand new wetsuit. Let's get a picture with the new DeBoer wetsuit on it. And it actually made a post in the Triathlon magazine Canada, or Triathlon Canada magazine, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of nice to support the DeBoer wetsuit. But before the race started, I wanted to test out the water, and it was very, very rocky. Like the entry into the water was very, very rocky. So I wanted to figure out the best way to get in the water, feel the water, get the spit out of my goggles. It's actually called spit. It comes in a little bottle, squirt it in there, and it's great anti-fog. I love it. And get used to the feel for the water and see where do I want to exit the lake with minimal stepping on stones. And what I figured out how I had to do it was I would enter on the far right, exit on the far left, which is the same side. But as I was swimming, as I finish, I would swim until not my hands touch the ground, but actually my chest touched the ground. So you're getting really, really close, right? And so when the rocks touched my chest, like these big, rounded stones, then I could put my hands down, get up, and then get out. So I knew that would be my entry and exit point. So it's always good to do that before the race. Go in and scout it out and see where you're going to enter and exit. So that was very key for me. Now, it was time for us to start. And the race organizer said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We are going to go row by row by row in transition. I was at the first rack. Actually, I was in the second rack. The first rack was for the relay. And my athlete, Pablo, was in the first rack. So he was lined up in the first spot. So Pablo was there, and then someone was beside Pablo, and then I could see this lady just behind, and she looked fast. I'm like, I think she's a swimmer. But what was interesting was this guy behind me. He was a young guy, a young junior, and he was saying, hey, excuse me, can I come up forward because I'm a fast swimmer? And I'm like, ooh. So that perks my ears. I'm like, okay, fast swimmer, junior. And I turned around and I said, hey, how fast are you? He says, well, I'm pretty fast. I'm a swimmer. And I go, okay, for example, for 1,500 meter swim, how fast can you do it? He's like, 17 something. I'm like, you need to be in front of me. You need to be in front of everyone in this race. So he went to the front, and he ended up becoming the first in the water. And then Pablo says, is there anybody else who wants to switch? So I switched with him. So I moved from like fifth spot into second spot. And I know that I'm faster than Pablo, and so it makes more sense to have faster, slower swimmers. So that's how I was going to start. And then I asked the starter, how are we going to do this? And she's like, okay, once the first swimmer goes, we're going to go one at a time. And we were standing 6 feet apart, like 2 by 2 by 2, as if we're going onto Noah's Ark or something. It was crazy. Once one swimmer went in and hit the water, that was the chance for the next swimmer to start running to go to the water. So it was about, I would say, like a 5-second delay. And we had, I don't know how many people were actually in the race. I think last number I heard was 90, but I don't think all 90 showed up. But I also knew I did the math quickly. And I go, in my head, I don't think we're going to get all the swimmers in by the time we get around. All right. So, and sure enough, it didn't happen. But there were 3 buoys, 1, 2, 3, in kind of like a diamond shape. I remember doing a Facebook Live to my athletes the day before the race saying, look, when you start that swim, don't go like a crazy person. Just hold back a bit. Well, I didn't hold back as much as I should have. So before I got to the first buoy, I'm like, ah! And I just felt like I was going too hard. I had to really focus and talk to myself about slowing down. Slow down, stretch, long, smooth strokes. That lady that I said she's a good swimmer, well, sure enough, she passed me in about 20 strokes. I'm like, oh, there we go. So I stayed in 3rd spot. I entered the water in 2nd, and then I was in 3rd throughout the whole time. The last buoy was really difficult to see because of the sun was coming up, and the buoy was right in line with the sun. But fortunately, I could see the splashes from the swimmer in front of me, so I just followed the splashes towards the buoy, and then there was a gigantic finishing arch or start arch that was we could use to sight. Once we got to I found the lake to be okay. I live in Auburn Bay, and I always say to people, look, we live in the best lake in Calgary. I still like my lake a lot. This lake is just okay. There's a lot of weeds in it. The temperature is a little bit cooler. It's not that deep. You can't really see where you're going. But I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it is what it is. I was just so happy that we had a triathlon to race. So I'm happy about that. Coming out of the water, I could see, I saw the 2nd place person coming out. So she was ahead of me. And I could still see people coming in. And the volunteer says, okay, you need to stay on the left when you come out. Stay on the left, stay on the left. And I'm like, okay, good. Now, usually they have like helpers to get you out of the water. So they hold your hands or your arms and they help get you out of the water. But because of COVID, they can't do that. So there's no assistance allowed. So like I said, I swam right to the rocks, got to my chest, and then I put my hands down, lifted myself up. And then I was running towards my transitioning. The Devore wetsuit is incredibly easy to get off. It is so fast. So by the time I get to my rack, I've got the top of the wetsuit off and the bottom came off. Super easy. Now, my transition was pretty quick. It's under a minute. So what I do is I just take the wetsuit off, the swim cap off, goggles off, put it on the ground beside my bike, helmet on, buckle it up, take my bike, and then just run to the start. And then once I get to the start, I mount the bike, put my feet on top of the shoes because they're clipped into the pedals, and then away I go. Once I'm on the bike, then I turn on my bike computer, hit start, and then away I go. And then about, I'd say, a kilometer down the road, I reach down and I tighten up my straps of my shoes, and then I go. And I was just, I was in race mode, trying to find that guy who's in 1st spot. I knew that out of transition, I was in 2nd because I passed the lady. She was a little bit slower in transition than I was. And so I was trying to catch this guy in front of me. Oh my gosh, I could not see him at all. I could not see him. The course was a really nice course. It's in a very nice community here in Calgary. They used to have it on the highway, but they put it all inside in the community. It was turned out to be really, really nice. It was a very nice course. I like the new changes a lot. The first half of it was slow. You're going up some good hills. Some hills that I thought were bigger than expected. I remember going up the first hill going, oh my gosh, am I ever out of shape? This COVID thing has really affected my fitness. But I think it was just the hill. I should have had grade on my computer to see how steep it was, because it seemed to really slow me down. And a lot of people were complaining about that at the post race chat. So I just put my head down, try to catch this guy. I could not see him at all. I got to the end of the first loop, and then I could see him. And some people are saying, he's a minute ahead of you. He's a minute up there. And I just kept pushing. And I found that I could not even get this guy in my sight. He was gone. What was interesting, though, is we had a lot of athletes from No Limits out there. So it was so good to see people. We'd wave and, we'd cheer each other on. And it's so good when you're part of a crew doing a race together is so much fun. Like I love it a lot. It's so much better than racing by yourself. So you can see our colors are on our jerseys and stuff. They're so easy to pick out. They're either the blue with bubbles or pink with bubbles. Very, very easy to spot. And it's really cool to see people racing in all different spots along the way. Now, when I finished the second loop, I was coming into T2, coming up to the dismount line, get off the bike, left my shoes on the bike. I'm about to run, and I can hear, "Good job, guys." You're doing an excellent job. And I'm like, "Oh, guys, who's behind me?" And so, I realized, oh my gosh, it's Scott. So Scott's behind me. So he's made up a lot of time. I didn't even know he was there. I had no idea he was behind me. So he probably had me in his sights. He was chasing me down. And I had no idea he was back there. No idea. And at the end, when I looked at the results, he was 2 minutes faster than me on the bike. So he kicked some serious butt. So we got into transition together. My transition was fairly fast, but not great. Racked the bike, helmet off, left the glasses on. And then I just reached down and put my running shoes on. And for whatever reason, my toes didn't want to go in the shoes. And it was just kind of comical, kind of frustrating to me. Get in there. And once I got the shoes in there, I was going to grab my hat. I'm like, screw the hat. I'm not going to take the hat. And then Tom, he's the race director of 7.3. Todd, don't you want to take your hat? No, I don't want my hat. And so I'm running to the exit, and Scott's right there. He is like right behind me. Now I know Scott pretty good, and he's an excellent racer. He's raced the 7.3 World Championships 3 times. He's done Boston Marathon. He's a sub-3 marathoner. He's a fast runner. And so I don't want this guy on my heels leaving T2, like right on my heels. I can hear him breathing, right? And I can hear some people on the sidelines going, "Okay, guys, let's make this a race." Now, look, the guy in first place, he was, I think someone said he's 45 seconds up there, but we couldn't see him. For me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got Scott behind me. And then I just said, okay, focus on being smooth. Focus on being smooth and steady. And I'm like, if Scott's going to pass me, he's going to pass me, but I'm going to make him work. And so I just got into a nice groove. And right off the bat, I felt good. And we have to go up the hill. I'm like, just steady. And then before, you know what? I couldn't hear his breathing anymore. I'm like, where did he go? But I don't, for me, one of my strategies is if I'm like leading or in the front, is I won't turn around. I will not turn my head to see where he is. I will not do that. It's one of my little tricks. I don't like to do that because I think it's a sign of, a bit of a sign of weakness. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I did not look behind me at all until I got to the turnaround. And remember, the turnaround is at 2.5 kilometers. As I was reaching the 2.5 kilometer mark, I could see the lead guy. I'm like, he's right there. I'm getting him. I don't think I have enough time to get him. One of my favorite things I like to do in racing is I like to give people high fives. Low five, high five. I just like to slap hands with people. I just like that. We did that back in the day, and I still love doing it. And during a pandemic, you can't do that. You can't touch people. So I'm like, So I saw the lead guy. I gave him like a hanging high five or air high five. He gave me one back, which was pretty neat. And then I made the turnaround, and then you can see everyone coming. And Scott's not that far back. He might be, 20 feet behind me. But he's still behind me, but he looks good. And then behind him, there's like 4, 5, 6 fast people coming. And there's this one guy, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is rocking it. He is kicking butt. I'm like, it's not Scott I have to worry about. It's this guy. This guy is just motoring. The nice thing about after the turnaround, the 2.5 turnaround, is a lot of it is downhill. So it makes it easier, but you still have to keep that motivation up, and you got to keep your rhythm up, and you got to keep that pedal on the metal because it's only 2.5K and then we are done. And so I just kept going. Had a bit of a side stitch on my right side. So if you ever get a pain in your side, what I do is you alternate your breathing. So if you normally exhale, say on your right foot, then you exhale on your left foot, and eventually that gets rid of your cramp. That's a very good tip. It's a very good tip because for me, I used to get cramps and it used to bring me to a stop because I just couldn't continue. It was so painful. Okay, so I got 1 kilometer to goal mark, and it's still No one's behind me. Well, I can't hear them. I'm good. Just keep going. Still a kilometer. I'm thinking I'm doing like 4-minute kilometers, but I don't have a watch on. I don't know, right? And I'm just running. And then about 7:50 to go, I can hear breathing. I can hear footsteps. I'm like, that guy has caught me. That guy that I saw at the turnaround, he's caught me for sure. And so we're in COVID, so I don't want to block. Well, I don't want to block anyone's pathway anyway. So I move over to the right, and I know this guy's going to pass. Sure enough, he's going to pass. But I don't slow down. I keep my pace the same, and I can hear him getting closer and closer and closer. And then he passes me. And I look at him, it's Scott. I'm like, Scott. I didn't say it. I don't know if I say anything to him or not. Maybe I said, good job, Scott. Now, once he passed me, my head, there's a part of me that wants to just give up. It's like, and then there's a part of me that says, don't give up. And so I listened to the part that says, don't give up. And I was right behind him. And I just drafted him for a little bit. I'm like, Todd, you can't draft. COVID, you cannot draft. So I backed off and then moved over to the left side because I wanted to be safe. I wanted to keep everyone safe. Even though, we don't have COVID, we have to be safe. So now I'm on the left side and I'm watching Scott. And then, within about 20, maybe 30 strides, I'm side by side with Scott. I'm like, hey, side by side. And I can see the finish. The finish line is about 500 meters to go. It's still quite a distance away, right? So 500 meters is still a ways to go. And I'm looking at the pathway ahead, and there's a straightaway, and then it curves to the right. And I'm thinking to myself, I probably have 2 surges left in me. And the first one's going to go right now. And all I did was a little bit quicker. Like, it wasn't a strong surge. It was just a little bit of speed. A little bit of quicker turnover. And sure enough, I was able to get ahead of Scott. And I just stayed that same pace. And I could tell Scott was not matching my pace. And then I got to the corner where it turned right. And then I burnt one more match. And I stepped on the gas again so that I could finish ahead of him. And that was for me, that was a really nice feeling. Just to have Scott out there to race with someone that I know, someone to push me so hard. At the end of the day, he ended up beating me because he started behind me and it was a rolling start. So he ended up coming in second. Was he second or third? And I came in 5th overall. But I started in the water second and I crossed the line. I started in the water second and then I crossed the line in second. So for me, I was very proud of that. And just having that finish with Scott and not quitting and giving up and pushing, it made it so much fun. Like, it was so much fun to race again. When we finished, there were 2 finishing chutes. I went down one, Scott went to the other. And then there's volunteers handing you the bags. Inside the bag were some treats and a water bottle. And no, you don't touch anyone. Just hand the bag, take the bag, and away you go. And then the next step was, okay, guys, you need to take off your timing chip. They weren't doing it. You would take it off and you'd put it in the bucket. And I just threw it in the bucket. And so that was it. And then afterwards, I was standing there chatting with some athletes, and Pablo was there waiting for his wife, who was he was part of a relay. She was running with their daughter in a stroller, which is fantastic. But then I'm like, I can't stay here. Everyone has a mask. I don't have a mask. Plus, I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes, and mosquitoes are my kryptonite. Seriously, they are. So I went back to transition, put on my mask, and chatted with people, and we shared some war stories about the race. We all had so much good. We all had so much fun. We took some pictures. Then afterwards, we went back to an athlete's house, YM. She had a nice little post-race brunch for us. It was really, really good. The weather was good. I think as far as racing in the pandemic goes, it was fantastic. It really, really, really was good. Now, I want to just remind you of some unique parts of the race. One was that there were no aid stations. And I actually believe there might have been one. When you exited transition, I think there was a table there with something on it. But I chose not to take anything there. And I knew that with the sprint triathlon, we could do our own nutrition. So you could have the nutrition on your bike, and then you can run with what you need. And I think going forward in the future, that's how maybe a race is going to have to be, is you have your own nutrition, and I'm okay with that. Again, we had masks in transition. We did not have to have masks while we were racing. I chose not to use a porta potty. I didn't have to go. Look, I could have peed, but I didn't. I'm like, it's only a triathlon. Only a sprint. I can get away without doing it for 60 minutes or so. There was no hanging around the finish line, not too much. And there were 2 chutes, so that to separate people, so that they didn't go down the same chute, one on the left, one on the right. The finisher medal, etc., was handed to you in a bag. We had to remove our own timing strap. It was very well spread out in transition. I think in my rack, there were 4 bikes, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, so that we're well separated. The swim was a rolling start, and it was started by race racks, and we were seated according to our swim time, which was self-seated, which is good and bad because a lot of people don't know your speed. I think it would have been better if people said, look, I'm this speed for 1500 or something like that, and then you go towards that. Like that guy who could swim 17 for sure should be number 1, and then there's a few other swimmers that were faster than me that should have been ahead of me, and I should not have been second. So that could have been better. There are no high fives. You can't high five anyone. Even afterwards, you want to shake hands and stuff, say congratulations. There's none of that, and that's hard. No post-race food. So you miss that. But the other things we had was that we could still see people that we really know we don't see outside of triathlon. So it was good to see them, good to share stories and smiles and laughs. You can still smile with the mask on. You can still smile with your eyes. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And for me, it was great to bring out the fine china, the new wetsuit, the bike, the tri-top. We had 2 photographers out there who were volunteering their time to take pictures, and they did an amazing job. Just an amazing job. And it shows you that, these events are really good. People, there's so much enjoyment out of these races for, physical fitness, having a goal, having volunteers. People love volunteering, right? They give back, organizing it, having teams like my crew there and other teams out there for competition and camaraderie, and we can help people out when they're suffering, and as we pass people, when they pass us, hey, good job. It's a reminder of how good it is. And in this year where there's been so much negativity and a lot of fear and a lot of loss, it was a really, really nice break from all of that. Now, for sure, we had a reminder that was still happening because we have face masks and everyone's saying, look, keep your distance. But I believe we were one of the first races in Canada to run. And for me, I'm really proud of what they did. I'm proud of what we did as athletes. And I think it's a sign of things to come that, look, we can do it. Humans, we are very good at adapting, right? We're very good at adapting. Some people do not like change. I get that. Some people don't like change. And maybe they're not going to race anymore. And, it is what it is. But we do have to learn how to adapt, how to race in a different world and keep all of us safe. And that's the most important thing, is keeping all of us safe. That's it. That's the end of this podcast. You know what? I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you get out to do a race as well. And, if you're listening to this sometime in the future, hopefully races are up and running and we're all back to normal, and races are happening every weekend, right? And big, large numbers, and everyone having a great, great time. But that's it. That's the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I'm looking forward to our next podcast together. Hey, I'm Coach Todd. Mahalo. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hey, if you have any questions, please send me a note. You can contact me at Instagram at NoLimitsCoach and Facebook at NoLimitsTry. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a comment and a review on iTunes. I appreciate all reviews and questions. Happy training, and we'll talk soon.